Who are you? Okay, but who are you really? These days we often think about our identity as what makes us unique, but identity is also a mathematical idea, meaning that the sides of an equation are equal, no matter what numbers you swap in. It makes sense that identity is related to identical. So, what if we think about identity in terms of sameness, at least for a bit? There's plenty of interesting artwork out there that explores sameness, twinning, copying. You might look at humans in general and think it's amazing how similar we are really when you look at us as basic outlines or forms. As Roman Ondak showed, we all fit somewhere along a range of heights, but we pretty much cluster in the middle of the range. Is there such a thing as a human identity? An image of what used to be called mankind? Renaissance artists in Europe often thought so, but contemporary artists tend to use sameness more as a way of creeping out the audience. The idea that all humans are really the same is not very popular these days in art. Because nobody's just a human being, right? We all have a place and a time. To start with, we were all created by other human beings, and often those people shaped what our lives are like. As an artist, you might want to go out and question what your upbringing really meant, and what your family members, their lives, their own histories, mean for your life, as photographers such as Richard Billingham and Latoya Ruby Frazier have done. You might decide to cast your mum as a queen riding through your neighbourhood, like Adeyemi Michael, and see how that changes your feelings about yourself, your family, how you relate to the place where you live. As a person, you might feel quite sure about elements of your identity, saying, for example, I am Latvian, I am Sikh, I am bisexual, green-eyed, a cricket fan, or whatever. So, as an artist, maybe you proclaim a definite identity to the world, like Danielle Braithwaite-Shirley in her interactive video game artworks, which tell viewers who are not black and trans that they might not be welcome in the space of the artwork, that it takes hard work to be a real ally. The work fights against prejudice and violence by being very clear and direct. But maybe you feel more ambiguous about what your identities mean and how to express them, like the artist Bhupen Kakar, who was probably the first artist in India to include his gay identity within his painting. His imagery is odd. The way he perceives the world around him is different from other painters. What kind of visual language might express your identities? What scenes, what colours, what shapes for parts of you that don't have an agreed upon image or vocabulary yet? There are plenty of types of ambiguity. Maybe you look at ancient Greece, thinking of the classic examples of its sculpture, the image of a white marble god up there on a pedestal. And then it turned out that at that time the sculptures were actually painted in bright colours, were smeared with perfumed oils, and maybe offered food by worshippers, and suddenly that Greek art looks a bit more like this. So where does that leave the identities that were built on a foundation of those white gods and goddesses that were just there to be looked at? In this contemporary artwork by Taras Makacheva, 19th and 20th century paintings are transferred in the most dangerous, delicate, also ludicrous way possible. The paintings express ideas about the identity of Dagestan, a diverse place that has existed under many empires, but is now part of Russia. The feeling that the artwork gives is about how precarious it is to keep this Dagestani identity alive, and how hard people need to work to not just forget their past, especially when there isn't a lot of money around for huge museums. But we might also ask, bouncing off this work, who takes on the role of transmitting this identity? Who decides that Dagestani identity exists, especially in these paintings, more than in the variety of people's songs, food, dances, ways of living, ways of talking? You could think about these examples, the Greek and the Dagestani, and relate them to the problem of propaganda. This is art that purposefully creates a common identity or sameness, often for a nation, and therefore also marks off the people who don't fit into that image. An art tending towards propaganda would say, this is what Mexico looks like. An art of ambiguity might say, this is what Mexico looks like. But generally, art is often transmitting a point of view on an aspect of identity, whether it means to or not. Some people say, an identity is always a kind of performance or mask, even the most basic ones like being male or female, performed with different rules in different communities, changing always across time and space. And a person might shift between different ways of performing their identity. They might perform different identities in different contexts, depending if they're with their family, at work, at school, home, or abroad. When we start thinking like this, it starts to seem that we are the same as everyone else, in how changeable we are, but in some ways we aren't even the same as ourselves. Maybe you, watching this, are not sure how to describe your identity. Maybe you are a mixture of things which don't really resolve themselves easily. Maybe you think of yourself as normal for your area, similar to your friends, but your normal would be very unusual to someone from another place or time, right? Just like other people's idea of normal is probably strange to you. You might want to think a bit more about your own normal and what it's actually made of. One thing that artists can do, wherever they are and whether they focus on their own identity or not, is to dig a bit deeper.